fall too high to cut my hair.
That's Little Feat from their new album, Strike Up the Band. As you can hear, they're still cooking after all these years. These days, the singing and guitar slinging is done by Scott Sharrard, who learned from the best as he was growing up. Here is Scott to tell us what it takes to fit into a band that you first heard when you were a kid.
You know, I grew up on Little Feat. I saw my first Little Feat show when I was a teenager, and I was born in '76, so for me it was the Let It Roll era of the band. And Little Feat became one of my models for all the music I would play, and Lowell George had been a hero of mine since I was a small child. So when I played those first couple gigs, I came home and I started writing, and I got that song Midnight Flight, I think, started right there.
Right.
And then going into the pandemic, I had, a pretty inspired writing sprint that went from the spring of 2020 through the summer of 2020, which was all over here in the States, very, very tumultuous. And having that time off, I got 3 tunes out of that time off, and they were the other songs that I wrote on the record, Disappearing Ink, and the title track, Strike Up the Band. And there was another one also that I wrote in there. And then when we got back together and started touring, then Bill and Tony and I had a couple writing sessions, and Fred Tackett and I have been writing songs. Fred and I wrote a song with Sam Clayton. It's the only original that's on the Little Feat Blues album, Sam's Place.
Right.
So, yeah, that started the process. And then Bill Payne was doing a lot of co-writing all throughout 21 and 22 with Charlie Starr from Blackberry Smoke and the great producer, songwriter John Leventhal. He had a bunch of tunes sitting around that he wrote with the Grateful Dead lyricist Robert Hunter. We got one of those on this record.
Yep.
So it's kind of a compilation of really the last, few years of reforming the group. This is kind of the apex of it.
Yeah. So I gotta ask you and you probably already addressed this, but still, it's got to be intimidating. It's kind of odd joining such an established band, and there's quite a few guys that have been playing together for a very long time within the band already. And then there's always because you're the guitarist and the vocalist, you're the Lowell George replacement, which has got to be virtually impossible to do. So is there something you would recommend younger players who may be finding themselves in the same situation as to how to get into that and kind of join the band that you probably were a huge fan of, or you were a huge fan of?
Yeah, well, I'm a good person to ask that question because, and I will say before I talk about my view on it, that the word replace, oof, that's
yeah.
That just sends a shiver up my spine. It's like replacing Picasso or Marlon Brando. It's like you don't replace Lowell George or Paul Barrere, Richie Hayward, for that matter. The other 2 members who've passed away from Little Feat. So my life has been kind of like, in music, has been kind of like if you know the story of Zelig.
Yes.
Raised a rock and roll version of that, where I was raised by a musician in a house full of musicians. And when I was a teenager, I'm from Michigan, but I was a teenager in Milwaukee. I went to the High School of the Arts and studied with some of the best jazz musicians. Gerald Cannon, bass player for Elvin Jones and McCoy Tyner, who were Coltrane's band. Played with Mel Ryan, Wes Montgomery's organist when I was a kid. Played in clubs and hung out and took lessons from Hubert Sumlin, Howlin' Wolf's guitarist, Pine Top Perkins, Buddy Miles. I was in his band. A bunch of guys you've never heard of: Stokes, Willie Higgins, Harvey Scales. Absolute masters of the craft.
Right.
So I started out working with people who were legendary when I was 15, 16, 17, 18. So then I got to New York and went through a whole thing with a bunch of different, bands and solo careers and stuff, and then hooked up with Levon Helm for a while. I was with Greg Allman for the last 10 years of his life. I was his band leader, made 2 records with him. I wrote a couple songs with him. He covered a couple of my songs. We got Grammy nominations. So by the time I got to Little Feat, I had been my three favorite bands of my childhood were the band, the Allman Brothers, and Little Feat. So it was
Not
almost
bad.
like putting
Yeah,
it was
you're
like
all
putting
right.
the last thing, the last spoke in the wheel there. And particularly almost a decade, the last, 9.5 years of Greg Allman's life, living with him, writing songs with him, being his band leader, helping him put arrangements together, pick songs. That was the key element to me walking into that first gig to sub for Paul Barrere and going, okay, I know that I am not going to be overwhelmed by the folklore and the legend and the gravity of this.
Yeah,
I know how to go into this and share musical humility with my idols. That's what Greg taught me,
right.
because Greg was a rock star,
Yeah, he
um,
was.
the way Lil George was, right? So he had a commanding presence that would turn all heads. But the thing is that even with all that sway, he, in face of the music, was the most humble man you've ever met. I mean, he took it so seriously, and he was so dedicated to getting better. And working with him on songwriting was one of the most incredible experiences. Just the care and the diligence that he would take with that, with crafting lyrics and chord changes and how things would sing, how a word would sing, watching him do that. But that to me was humility and dedication. And what I did is I with Little Feat, I lean into that. And
Right,
every time, that gets you over the line with those cats, because they don't want to hear about what they've done. They want to hear about where they're going.
right. All right. So, and already, obviously, the band, as it was when you joined them, had a way of working together, and there were probably little insight. How did you work your way in to find your place in that?
It was exactly like playing with every great band I've ever played with. It's a tribal language, and
Right.
and I've been speaking this language since I was a small child. It was a piece of cake.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, just on a job level, on
Yeah,
like on an execution level. I mean, I had 3 weeks to get ready, and they gave me about 20, 25 songs, and I had to sing probably about 10 or 12 of them at that time. I sing a
right.
lot more of them now.
Yeah,
So I did my homework, and I practiced my ass off. But outside of that, I was able to just from jump ride the lightning with him. And if I wasn't able to do that, I would be the wrong guy for the job.
gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. All right, let's get back to, you mentioned Midnight Flight. I think it's just been released as a single and a video in the last few days. So, what can you, are any insights you can share with us about the song, the making of, the video, whatever you like to?
Tonight I'm gonna fly to you, almost where we need to be. Yeah, and I ain't gonna lie to you. You're the only one for me. When I fly to you, on a midnight fly to you.
Well, as I told you, I did write it right in
Yep.
the inspirational period of me playing my first Little Feat shows. It definitely is like it started that main riff, the guitar riff that starts the song that anchors it. That was definitely somewhat of a nod to Hate to Lose Your Lovin', I would say.
Okay.
It's definitely it's a nod to the Let It Roll. That song from the groove perspective is kind of like a mashup of two songs from Let It Roll. It's like a mashup of Hate to Lose Your Lovin' and One Clear Moment. It's kind of like those two merged in terms of the groove and the feel. And then the changes in the lyrics were something I came up with. It's a love song of sorts. But like all the songs I've written, I mean, I have 6 solo albums out there floating around, and two albums full of original songs that I sang with the Chesterfields before that, this band from Milwaukee that I moved to New York City with. So, I've got like 100 songs sitting out there on streaming services. You can hear my style, but I think, I'm 48 years old now, so I can actually kind of look back on all of it as a catalog at this point, even
Yeah,
if no
yep.
one's heard any of it.
You're a youngster yet.
The biggest fan of my catalog was probably Greg Allman, which is something I'll definitely take to the grave with me because
Yeah,
he used to listen to all my records and he really so did Ahmet Ertegun and
not
I've had
bad. Yeah.
a lot of fans and the guys in Little Feat are supportive of my writing, but the lyrics to Midnight Flight, it's a love song, but there's always I think all my material has kind of it has a spiritual searching quality to it. I think I'm a natural traveler. I'm not much of a homebody.
Gotcha.
So, and I share that even with my wife and kids. We love to travel and we're constantly moving around, and I'm really only comfortable when I'm moving.
All right.
I've always got a suitcase packed at all times.
I love it. All right. And do you write differently or specifically for Little Feat than you do, say, for your solo stuff, or do you just write and see where it fits?
Well, that's a yes for all of my songs on Strike Up the Band.
Right.
I would say I was pretty deliberate, and
Yeah.
I was in a phase, the three that I wrote right in the kind of honeymoon phase of me joining the band and the beginning of the pandemic. That 4 or 5 months or 6 months or whatever it was a really rich moment for me to like lean into, like the song Strike Up the Band. I
Yeah.
had a completely different arrangement for that, something really up. And then I ended up more like I was on the road with the band in 2021 and I rewrote the feel to feel more like Sailing Shoes on purpose. So
Okay.
it was a thing of like, this
Yeah.
is like my song, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's up tempo and it sounds like one of my tunes and I've written all the changes in the lyrics. And then I went, oh, I was playing Sailing Shoes one night and I was like, what if I took that thing exactly the way it is and
Yeah.
played it like Sailing Shoes? And that's a great kind of way to fit your music in. And the other thing is, man, is like I was so lucky to grow up when I did for this job because
Right.
I was 13 or 14 and I bought the Allman Brothers Seven Turns and Little Feat Let It Roll. And these were two bands that were not supposed to get back together.
Yeah.
And everyone was counting them out when they reformed, and they all
Sure.
said, "Oh, this is just a cash in." And they put out two records with a bunch of great songs and
Yeah.
got hits off it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I saw Warren Haynes with the Brothers and Craig Fuller with Little Feat even when I was young, and I said, "Wow, these guys have got balls, and this stuff is good. Like, this is good. This is real. This is stuff for the catalog."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
trying to use that as an inspiration for this too.
Cool. Cool. You mentioned Strike Up the Band, the song. It's got Larkin Poe on it, and the album itself was produced. Vance Powell is a guy in Nashville. So what was his role in like bringing in the guests? Or was that the band thing? Was that a producer thing? Was it a natural thing? How did it work?
Well, this was definitely this record was a collaboration between Bill Payne and I from the beginning, and then the management introduced us to Vance Powell. I was a fan of Vance's engineering work with the great producer Dave Cobb.
Oh yeah,
They did the Chris Stapleton records, and
he was just here, Chris Stapleton. So I had to put on a show.
he's an amazing artist, man. And so I knew Vance from his work with Dave as his engineer and mixer. And then the management brought him in and said, "Look, look at this guy as a collaborator to come in and work with the band." And Bill and I did the lion's share, I would say, of what you would call the pre-production, and got a group of songs together and got them to Vance, and then he helped us whittle that down. We had some rehearsals in Nashville as a band, and then once we got the songs whittled down, we got in the studio, and it was a pretty organic process in the studio between the band and really Vance and Bill and I kind of taking turns keeping everything moving, kind of passing the baton between the three of us.
Right.
And then once we had all the basics done and all my work done, Vance and Bill hung out for a little bit and added some things. But honestly, the guests like Larry and Teresa, Larry Campbell, Teresa Williams, I've known them for many years, and Tony Leone, our drummer, has been working with them for many, many years through. That's all part of this New York scene we have with the Levon Helm Studios crowd. So,
Oh, right.
but they've also been working with Bill Payne, and Bill Payne had the idea to bring them in on a track. Molly Tuttle came in through our management. Larkin Poe came in through a combination of our management and Vance Powell together. And these are all like Molly and Larkin Poe, they're Nashville-based artists.
Right.
So it was a thing where they'd go over to Vance's studio and do stuff all the time. So it was a thing where it was easy for them to just pop in and do an overdub. We weren't. I was there with Molly when she overdubbed, but she didn't do it with the band. And then Larkin did their stuff. I haven't even met them yet. I can't wait to meet them because I've been a fan.
Sure, they're lovely people.
I mean, their music is great. I mean,
Yep,
they're
yep.
just great artists. So I was thrilled to have them on a song that I wrote, especially, and you know, really there were, and then there were my friends Mark Franklin and Art Edmiston who were in the Greg Allman band, and also played horns on all my records. They're from Memphis,
Right.
and I introduced them to Little Feat when we were on the road, and we stayed in touch with them, and we had them drive over from Memphis and add all those great horns to the record.
Yeah. Now I see you got something called Feet Fest coming up in August. What's that all about? Happening in Woodstock.
Well, it's not a podiatry convention.
Darn. You get a bunch of people with feet fetishes showing up, you're in
Yeah,
trouble.
well, I tell you, if we maybe we should do the Feet Fest OnlyFans page. That might be the missing piece of our revenue. So we're going to Woodstock, and here we are back at the Levon Helm connection. I live in New York City, as does Tony Leone, our drummer, and he and I have been going up there for, geez, it's almost 3 days. It's almost 30 years we've been going up there and playing. It's like 25 years or something. Tony first, me after him, because he was in the band Ola Bell with Amy Helm first,
Right.
and then he played with Levon. So I have a house up there where my mother-in-law lives that we own together. So I'm up there all the time. And Peter Shapiro, the great New York City promoter, who's really part of our community here, our music community in New York City since the Wetlands in the 90s. He has the Sphere, famously in Vegas, and the Brooklyn Bowls, but he's taken over the Bearsville Theater in Woodstock. And we thought it'd be a good idea to collaborate with him because he's such a great promoter and friend of all of ours and all our projects and Little Feat. He also has the Capitol Theater where we're playing in a couple weeks.
Oh yeah.
So we're working with Peter on it, and we're doing 3 nights, and we're going to have some special guests, which we haven't announced yet, and we're also going to be recording a live album
Okay.
simultaneously.
Uh,
So it's going to be quite a deal. And it's like the 30th, 31st of August, and 1st of September. It's those 3 consecutive days.
cool. Sounds like fun. Very good. Very good. And
You
are
going
you?
to come visit us?
Well, we'll see. Everybody is very reluctant to go back to the States these days with the current climate because they're like my daughter is an American citizen, but her husband and her kids are not. So they're afraid they'll get locked up or, sent back home or whatever, even though they got all the paperwork sorted. So it's very scary for folks outside of the States looking in to see what's going on. And it's very all, up in the air and unsettling.
Yeah, that's wow. That's well, you're an American, so it's a different conversation. I don't know.
Yep.
What's most of your audience? Where are they from?
Well, mostly in New Zealand, but we have a significant chunk in the States as well. So yeah, it's
Yeah, I
just
have to ask because I mean I listen every day to WWOZ on my app on my phone, and it's like I listen to it all over the world.
right. Yep. Well, that's the way it's kind of everywhere. Everything's everywhere. You can find
Well,
everything.
I don't know if the appropriate thing to do is apologize to all your listeners who aren't American
So we
because
won't. I don't think.
I'm from New York. I mean, I had the receipts on this motherfucker, for 30 years.
Yeah.
I can't figure out why everyone else fell for it, but
Well,
we keep trying to do the right thing, and
Yep.
I'm sorry it's happening, but I think, I've been saying for many, many years that, in America, for all it's done, good and bad, and it's a lot more bad recently, if you really want to know the true voice of the American people and the heart and the soul of the American people, you listen to our music. That's how
Right.
you know us.
Yeah. Well, there's hope yet
So.
then.
Yeah, when you really get down, you gotta grab onto that. And in terms of affecting change and where all this is going, I mean, we don't have any control over that. And,
Yep.
we have a problem here too as bands, is like there was Brexit and then there was the pandemic, and now there's this just, acid trip we're going through, these crazed experiments that are being conducted on our world economy. And I don't know when or if ever we'll get back overseas to play gigs, but we're so far over here, and this could change tomorrow, like everything else. Our next 2 legs of our tour are almost sold out here in the
Yep.
United States.
Yeah.
And we've only been touring in the US the whole time. I mean, we did like a Feet Fest in Cancun, and we did a Jamaican thing, and we've done some cruises, but that's about it.
Yep. Well, I'm guessing you've got quite a following in Australia too, which is just across the ditch here. So, feel
But
free
they
to.
keep threatening. They keep threatening to close down Byron Bay, which is
Yeah.
it's the only one I've ever done. I did it with Greg Allman once,
Right.
like
Yep.
2015 or something.
That's kind of the gateway to everything else down here at this point.
Yeah, but I keep hearing he's going to shut it down. So if that gets
Yeah,
shut
well.
down, there'll be another thing off the table.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what happens. In the meantime, what are you going to do on May 9th when the record's out?
I'm on the road, man. I think we're playing. Let's see, the 8th we're at the Capitol Theater. We're playing in New York. We're playing somewhere on the 9th.
All right.
They don't like to give us days off, I think they got life insurance policies on all of us.
If you enjoyed this episode of the 13th Floor's Music Talk series, please be sure to subscribe to the website or to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram and wherever you find your podcasts. There's a whole lot more to discover.